we're seeing that Eddie Howe is saying he's committed to Newcastle, but doesn't really seem too keen to go for the England job, which doesn't surprise me. Does and doesn't surprise me in a lot of ways because he's in a good spot at Newcastle. You know, he's at a spot where a team that's got money, that's got ambition. I think they might be having some issues with fair financial fair play, but we'll see what happens with that. But regardless, they've got a good team. They're in Europe. They'll probably be in Europe next season, as in they'll finish in league positions to finish in Europe for the season after. So I imagine Newcastle will finish in the top 7 or 8. So he's in a good spot. Doesn't seem like he's under any threat of really being sacked. I don't think there's too much pressure on him, even though I think in football everything does come to an end, and eventually there will be more pressure on him. But it's interesting to see that he's keen to stay at Newcastle. I think for a lot of people, he would be England's number one choice manager. I think most people would want to see Eddie Howe over Graham Potter. I think tactically, yeah, I would probably want to see Eddie Howe more, but because of this situation where Eddie Howe is currently at a job, I would probably prefer to see Graham Potter. Just because Graham Potter, he's been out of a club for a while. He's just, in my opinion, just as good as a manager. Like I've talked about before when I talked about my video previously about Graham Potter going to the England team. Of course, Graham Potter, he did get sacked at Chelsea, but for me, if you're a manager, you get a 7-year deal and the owner sack you after 7 months. For me, that's more of a reflection on the owners than you, in my opinion. But it'd be interesting to see what happens with Eddie Howe at Newcastle, because Eddie Howe could find himself, potentially coming under pressure from Newcastle, maybe if he's not performing early on in the season or he can't get the transfers that he wants, then maybe that England job will be a bit more enticing to Eddie Howe. But at the moment, he's committed to Newcastle, and I think that does make sense for Eddie Howe. I think that probably is the better career move, because going to England, the England job, in a lot of ways, could be seen as career suicide. Or maybe not career suicide, but everything you do after England will be a step down. I think we saw this sort of with guys like Frank Lampard getting big jobs early on in his career. He did a year at Derby and then got the Chelsea job. Now, for a guy like Frank Lampard, the highest level he's ever going to get to is the Chelsea manager's job. And he's had that a year into his career. He's never going to reach the heights again. He got to that level early on in his career. He didn't really impress to most people. He didn't really impress. He got sacked. And then, he found himself at Everton and then, got sacked from there. And then that will be it for him. But, speaking of Frank Lampard, there's a lot of guys that saying, he's potentially a shout for the England team, but I've got no interest in seeing Frank Lampard manage the England team. I think Paul Merson was saying, he formerly played for England and, he experienced what it's like to play in a tournament. But for that, all we have to say is if you consider failure experience, then, hey, man, I don't know what to say for you, man. But yeah, like we said, Eddie Howe staying committed to Newcastle amid England talk. But let's see what happens, because that's for now. Situations change. England could maybe put together a proposition that would really tempt Eddie Howe. But I do think it's key for a English manager to manage the England team. I know a lot of people have been talking about Pochettino, who I think he's a great coach. But England's history with foreign coaches isn't that good. I think Pochettino's probably, out of the options we've had, Pochettino's probably the best coach. Out of Eddie Howe, Graham Potter, Pochettino. I think Pochettino's the best coach out of them three. But I think the FA won't go in that direction again, where they had Capello and Eriksson, and those two were seen, in terms of media and perspective, was seen as wasting that golden generation. So I think it definitely will be an English manager next, but it doesn't look like it'll be Eddie Howe. But let's see what happens, because situations change, like I say.